All right, it is 10:15. Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday to you. It's the 27th of September, so it is the final weather briefing of the month of September. I'm pleased to welcome AccuWeather senior meteorologist Tyler Royce as this week's weather presenter. And Tyler, if you will give me 1 second, I forgot to turn on screen sharing. It is now enabled, and so you are more than welcome to take it away.
All righty, let me quickly get my stuff where I need it to be. I was planning on going up to the weather center today, but concurrently right now I'm actually attending a what is it? The atmospheric blocking virtual workshop. And so I'm actually here in the office attending that and realized, well, some of the stuff is still going on later after, so I wasn't going to be able to get to walk the building and back and being able to do everything that I needed to do. So I appreciate Chris for getting me all set up to be doing this virtual for you guys. We're going to start with satellite. I'm going to jump. There's going to be a lot I'm going to pack into this discussion. We're going to talk about the local weather for roughly the next 5-7 days. We're going to take a look at the tropics with Sam and what can be coming down the pike following that. Within that, then we're going to quickly take a quick tour into Europe quickly to see there's some later this week, there's potential for some significant weather in which I'll get into why, in my opinion, that has more heightened reasoning for us to be concerned about. And then finally we're only 2 months away from quote unquote winter. Winter forecasts for seasonal forecasting going to be coming out public, unless you've already gotten the Farmer's Almanac, over the next month or so. And we're going to talk about some of the factors here that the long range team is taking a look at, and something that some key research that came out, I want to say it was either last August it got published or August 2019. August 2020 got published, or it was August 2019 that got published. That was very key if for those who are looking for cold and combining with everyone's favorite polar vortex. So there's a whole lot I plan on covering for today. So quickly taking a look at satellite, much of the nation is largely dry. Very little cloud cover from roughly Florida all the way up into the northern plains. We have a weather feature that's moving through Ontario, Hudson Bay, Quebec. We'll move into Newfoundland, Labrador with the Australian cold front, and we'll quickly take a look at radar right after this. That sets us up kind of for what comes tomorrow. And then we're going to have what's going to happen is the weather feature down here in the Four Corners that's moving into Texas. We'll get into that's going to be a big player in parts of the Central Plains into the Midwest for some of this week, and how it can impact the commodities as we're getting into the harvest time period for much of the heartland of the United States. So let's go quickly take a look at radar here. Right now, what we have is rain that's moving through upstate New York that's associated with, as I said, the storm that is up here in Ontario, Quebec, Hudson Bay. That's going to be bringing more rain to more of northern New England, and we'll get into the modeling of that shortly. And then we have a big upper level storm that's going to largely slowly make its way into the plains. And then finally, we have another Pacific Northwest storm bringing much needed rain. I don't think we can harp on that enough. That helps with the fires, but the converse of that is any burn scars, you get any moderate to heavy rain, you have risk the increase for flooding of that way. So let's quickly take a look at what's happening at the big picture, the 500 level here. You have your GFS on the top left, your GEFS on the top right, and we have European on the bottom left. With this map background and with this variable, I don't have the ability to show the EPS of the 500. I do show the anomalies, and I will show you that briefly. But largely, we have key dominant factors. It's kind of off the map here. But you have Scandinavian blocking going on right now. That plays the role. Scandinavian blocking, if you've heard me before, and I will preach this to my death, is kind of the big boulder that blocks everything up and leads to big traffic jams. So with that going on, you have troughiness that is stalled northwest of Ireland in the UK that leads to you have some kind of ridging off of Newfoundland Labrador, leads to a trough swinging through the northeast. We have the big trough from the plains, Midwest, into the west, but we have the cutoff feature, the upper level feature that I mentioned earlier in the radar. And then finally, you have a very potent upper level trough that's trying to move this ridge. I'm going to try to change my color here. That's going to try to move this ridge to the east. And then the rinky dink thing on here on the 500 is Hurricane Sam, major Hurricane Sam going on right now. Interestingly enough to point out, you want to point it out, here is the remains of Peter. And if reading what the tropical team has been highlighting, I think it has another 24, 48 hours left to potentially redevelop back into a tropical entity before it gets pulled away. And we'll get into what one model is showing what happens with Peter down the road. So that's what I did not want to do, of clearing my information that way. But we'll go to the height anomalies here. And so you see we have the Scandinavian block, the pattern that I've outlined. Here we do have the European ensembles at the bottom right here. But as we go forward slowly with that Scandinavian block, you notice the things take from the East Coast of the United States eastward, things are very slow progressing through into Wednesday. So that ridge, that very expansive ridge in the Midwest into the West, kind of gets shortened, gets shrunken as you go into the midweek. But what it does is it pumps up the blocking that's going to be occurring in Hudson Bay, much of eastern Canada, and you kind of get into almost a Greenland blocking regime by the end of the week. And a lot of this is the Scandinavian block is going to start to shift into northwest Russia. So you move your potent trough that is between Iceland, Ireland, and the UK, you're going to move it over northwest Europe. So you're kind of shifting things as you go through that. And what you kind of are doing is your cutoff that's over the four corners, your troughiness that was over the northeast, you kind of are cutting those off essentially according to these model runs here. And you have troughiness continuing to try to break into the west at times, and then it lets up in going with that. So let us quickly start off with what we see then at the surface. What does that lead to? As I allude to in the satellite, much of the plains to the southeast, even to here in the mid-Atlantic, largely dry. There could be a spotty shower in the Ohio Valley, but you have the cold front move across the northern New England. And you're going to have a storm that's going to develop at the tail end of this in the Ohio Valley later tonight. And that's going to lead to warm front kind of moving through, allowing it. Maybe it's the last time that we will see 60 degrees as a low around here or in parts of New England, mid-Atlantic, where we are. And then this will, as the storm moves through, we have the associated cold front will move through, lead to scattered showers. Thunderstorms probably from Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. to Richmond. But notice you have your cutoff here in the four corners. It's going to expand into Texas. And that's what we've been watching and looking at today's runs. All the rain looks to have, from what I saw, even yesterday and even on Friday when I worked, it looks like a lot of the rain has shifted to more as you go Wednesday into Friday, more of the Missouri, eastern Texas frame, and not necessarily the western plains. And the two reasons why I bring this up: one, this dry weather is good for harvesting for the corn and soybeans, so they'll be able to really crank out the harvesting in there. Even if, and we're looking at not a great corn and soybean crop, more so the corn than the soybean. with the drought conditions in the upper Midwest and much of Iowa and even the Dakotas. But you have the cotton crop is about ready to get harvested. And something it's unique with the cotton crop for much of its duration is it can get 4 inches of rain and it's not really impacted until it gets to its mature stage and opens up and you have the cotton out. That is when it is most vulnerable to weather damage. And so where you have your big cotton producing areas happens to be in the panhandle of Texas and the south, just off the southeast coast of Texas. So this rain coming in is what we have to watch is where do the bands of heavy rain set up? Are they closer to those cotton locations or not? Big reason is if it is, this is where we're going to see the potential for more damage and what is looking to be a very promising cotton crop. I want to say last month, one of the weekly reports that give the conditions of the crop was highlighting that it's the best that the cotton crop has been since 2004. And we're talking, I think like 80% was good or excellent condition. So that is huge. So if there's any chance for any potential damage, this is the kind of the time that we're looking at as we go through. In general, with this storm, you're going to be looking at general 1 inch pockets of 2 to 3 inches where those heavy rain bands set up. The reason why this upper level storm doesn't really move out of once on the surface, the rain kind of stuff moves into the plains, Midwest, doesn't really move eastward and takes its time as we go back to what we have in the upper level pen. The trough, we cut off the trough that's over the northeast, so it's not going anywhere. Everything east of that is blocked. So the ridge pumps up and you pump the blocking going on right now. So the upper level features isn't really moving anywhere. So what you do is you're going to have days and days and days of showers and thunderstorms that go from the Midwest, Eastern Dakotas, all the way down to Texas. And so in some locations, running this through at least through Saturday, you can have localized flooding when you continuously, if the heavy rain or the heavier thunderstorms continue to ride over each other, because what you're going to have the influence of here is also going to be the Gulf moisture. So you're going to be able to feed all the showers and thunderstorms. You weren't able to have any tropical oceanic moisture influence over the four corners. You're now able to have it across the plains into the Midwest in that area. So that leads us to the all-important game Saturday evening. Even with the differences in terms of how progressive we're going to be moving this band of rain and thunderstorms Saturday, if you look at the GFS, almost like the storm is moving through the surface low. You have a surface low in Wisconsin, and you have some kind of calm ahead and cold front coming through the mid-Mississippi down in eastern and southern Texas. European is a little bit farther back. It looks to be largely dry here for the game, so we don't have to wear ponchos and the great stripe out for the evening. And then as we continue to go through, there's a possibility if the GFS being as progressive as it is, could be a shower or some rains late Saturday night into Sunday. And I go back to this, given the pattern set up here, I'm more leaning towards probably a slower solution. It's going to take, unless things change and everyone is going to say we're going to go progressive. Slow, if in my theory and colleagues of mine, slow things down. That is probably the biggest thing that we learn in terms of when you have a block pattern is the certain models will always try to speed things up, and it tends to not work out. We go back to last week's heavy rain event. Earlier in the week, I want to say it was Monday, the GFS was trying to plow this through on a Wednesday. The European was more slowish, more of a Thursday event. again, what won out, or maybe you kind of can argue is kind of a blend, but the true faster solution necessarily did not work out. And I again think that's going to be the case here. Is going to, for here, maybe we get some showers tonight into tomorrow. Otherwise, we're looking at the potential to be dry well into early next week in that regard. So what does that look like temperature wise? So temperature, we'll look at temperature departures here. Warmth, it's what's the theme this spring into through all the summer? The warmth, the core of the warmth happens to be out in the west, the plains, and we happen to be sitting on a trough that is seasonable or to slightly below normal. But we do warm up tomorrow briefly in terms of the overall temperature departure. But as long as we continue to have the upper level troughiness in the northeast, it's going to more feel like autumn in terms of temperatures, highs in the low to mid 60s, lows in the 40s, and the outlying location can be in the upper 30s here locally. A lot of your warmth in turn is kind of squished Mississippi Valley, Tennessee, Ohio Valley, southeast. And as you continue to have your storms into the Pacific Northwest, you keep the temperature threat at bay, closer towards normal in that regard. Any questions regarding the short-term, well, I say short-term, but the short to medium-term through Saturday, Sunday forecast locally? If you still have any questions, you can still ask. I'm going to now move on to the only tropical entity that we have out there that's named Hurricane Sam, which is a Category 4 hurricane. See, this is what we put out earlier for clients, and then we have the 11 a.m. advisory that'll come in. We expect it to remain a 4 over the course of the next 24 into 48 hours, and it continues to remain a 3. If we zoom in here, it looks like it's going to sideswipe Bermuda. So Bermuda, in terms of major impacts, we'll take a look at this here. When it becomes a Cat 2, we're looking at that's a Saturday afternoon time frame. Yes, Bermuda is still on the left side of it, but at the current time we have it east of them. I'm trying to remember the one that just went east of them. Maybe at the beginning of the month, end of August or something of that nature, we had one now. So many names that I've drawn a blank. And then you have the remains of Peter here that has potential to develop, as I mentioned, and I'll show you that in a bit of what that can do. There's some other areas that we are watching that we put out for some chances for development over the next couple of days. We have a wave between Sam and Cape Verde. There's a medium chance to develop, but we're looking at another tropical wave that's coming off of Africa. We can actually go back to here's the first wave that has the medium chance over the next couple of days, and then we have the wave that's coming off of Africa right now that has a higher chance of becoming named going forward. It is interesting to note something I didn't really think, or not necessarily think about, but I'm kind of shocked it didn't happen, and it still hasn't happened, is last year's active hurricane season. Out of so around 30 named storms, not one of them impacted Europe at all as a tropical rainstorm or as a actual organized tropical entity, which I found to be very fascinating, since over the last 30-ish years, the last time we had an active hurricane season, there were at least 4 impacts. And we've gone so far through the halfway point of this season, and again, there have been 0 impacts to Western Europe from any tropical features. But the European tends to be showing something, so we're going to quickly jump over into the Europe side of things. So I don't know if anyone has really been following, especially the crisis going on in the UK. They're having a big energy crisis going on. Some of that is dealing with natural gas resources drying up coming out of Russia, but a lot of the energy sustainable stuff has, as I wouldn't say failed, but there's having issues. So one of them happens to, well, this isn't really energy efficient and green energy, but the oil rigs out in the North Sea, they finally needed to be upgraded or had some maintenance done. Those went off as COVID restrictions went off. But the wind turbines that surround the island in the UK have largely been quiet, I would say, over the last 2 months. And this is typically the time when winds start to pick up. You get gustier fronts, gustier storms to move through. And that really hasn't happened. They've been largely on the quote unquote calmer side in terms of events. And so getting green energy from that, from your wind turbines, has a significant drop off. And so there's gas shortages, and there, I think, I won't say it's fertilizer plants, but CO2 plants in which it's being made to package meats, frozen, that we see that in grocery stores, that I was reading about. Those have gone into a shortage. So grocery stores over there have become an issue in terms of, it's very much like if we went back to COVID back in March to 2020, when everything went off the shelves in certain cases. That's what's happening right now in the UK. And this time it's not really, COVID is a part of it, but not the main reason of why that's happening. So the reason why I bring this up is as we go through, here's the remains of Peter. There's a reason why I point out here. We're going to watch it, track. As you go through, we have a strong, I would say strong, we have a cold front move through, some heavy rain today across UK and Ireland, largely, and you notice the very strong area of high pressure. It's blocking everything from getting really into Central and Eastern Europe here. What is happening in part of the, if I go back to the conference I'm attending, it is this area here, drought, that you're going to have your latent heat release. And what is being found and what's being proposed and talked about is that has a role in terms of strengthening, if I understand correctly, strengthening your blocking that is currently going on the top side of it. So it helps maintain the blocking when you have where you have your latent heat being released between your storm and your anticyclone going on right there. So that's something to, at least to put, from what I learned something early this morning, to put it into application right now. As you go through, notice Peter gets hooked up along, or the remains of Peter gets hooked up along remains of a cold front. The GFS kind of peters it out, very easily peters it out as the storm comes racing eastward across the Atlantic, and then it gets conglomerated in the upper level trough, and things are spinning around, and that's where we have the potential for a windstorm later this week. Wind gusts 50 to 60 miles per hour for a good part of Ireland, UK. Some of that could even reach to northern France, Belgium, Netherlands. Wouldn't be shocked to see gusts not up to 90 miles per hour in some of the higher elevations in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Notice the European is not as aggressive with this storm, but what it does as it goes through is it does have Peter. It takes Peter a little bit longer to make it across the Atlantic, and here's Peter on the European side. And as you go through the weekend, Peter gets kind of rejuvenated, gets caught up in the upper level trough that's stuck over Northwest Europe, and rejuvenates it, and brings another round of heavy rain and gusty winds to much of Western Europe. So I told a coworker earlier today who was working the Europe desk, at the time I said the European looks to be an outlier, and largely in part because you have the RPEG model here is not as, it's more in line with the GFS. You even have the ICON, which is a more common European model besides ECMWF, which is more high res. on Friday is more in line again with the GFS itself. So I said kind of the European is the outlier here in that regard. Now we're taking a look at something that we are going to have to necessarily watch over the weekend if things are going to be slightly changing. So there's some much needed wind coming to help with the wind energy over in the UK. And the energy crisis just isn't necessarily in the UK. Over, I want to say, probably the last couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks, several energy companies over in the UK have been closing. So it's a ripple effect of what's actually happening is energy companies are closing just in time for when people need to, because they have contracts over there for their energy, and people could be paying 2 to 3 times more than what they have been paying for energy going forward. So again, it's big reason why it is a significant event in that. And lastly, I do want to close with a couple of things that we are monitoring in terms of a winter side. It's something that I did learn in terms of polar vortex, southern stratospheric warming events, and weather patterns. We're going with the weak La Nina. With that, when coupled with the MJO, again, you kind of favor more of negative NAO type of a pattern. With that, it's interesting, the QBO right now is trending easterly and it's descending easterly. But it was interesting over the last 30 years in cases of when you have a La Nina, doesn't matter the strength, the QBO of when it was descending easterly in a fall period, well, even you could say late summer into the fall or autumn, it tends to stall out and stay and fail to reach 50 millibars during La Nina years until after the winter, late winter. You have to go back to 1962 to when you actually see something of the easterlies actually making it through to 50 millibars regarding the QBO. So I'm going under the idea that the QBO is going easterly, QBO is going to stall, not going to hit easterly at 50 millibars. We say 50 millibars, a lot of research in terms of what happens at the surface has been done using 50 millibars. So that's why I reference it. So those are kind of the two big playmakers in regards to that. Regarding the paper that came out that I've referenced now twice with sun stratospheric warming events is typical weather pattern is you have a typical Greenland blocking setup. So you have your high, we'll go back, you have your potent high using the European GFS here, even the European, you have your strong highs here. That's when you set up your negative NAO pattern. When you have the event starting, that's when you typically have your negative NAO. And what has typically been found is it just isn't a 1 day, 2 day event at the surface or with the weather pattern, is that it lingers at least 2 to 3, 4 weeks. So it's very interesting if you take a look at what happened this past January into February when we had the major SSW event around New Year's, and then you had, as we were trying to recuperate, we had a secondary one at the end of January into early February. You saw the negative NAO pattern really dominate the north from eastern United States into Europe a lot within that time frame. So it's very fascinating to see recent research come out and actually seeing it live going forward. So that's something if you want to take a look, if you're interested in such SSW events and weather regimes and all that, that is something you can take a look at going forward this winter. AccuWeather Meteorologist, we are looking at an SSW event later this month, and then we're taking a look at potential one for some end of November into December, potentially another one in January. And then it's interesting of what happens in February into March. We do think the pattern does become more negative, positive NAO, but in my research, I realized that 2017-18 winter is an analog, and that is when, if you go over to Europe, you hear the beast from the east, which was, you had a SSW event at the end of February that brought the significant cold to the northern half of Europe, and significant snows to much of the United Kingdom, and the tabloids named it beast from the east. that's when that event happened, at the end of February into March. That's something I was like, wonder if, even though much of the month, February is positive, we do get some late event in that regard. And so with that, I will end with any questions, comments, anything.
Thank you
Great to
very
see
much,
you, Bill.
Tyler. And anyone who does have questions, feel free to drop them in chat. Just make sure that they are directed to everyone so that we can all see them. The Q&A is also available for any inquiring minds. And I'm also going to keep an eye on YouTube. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, I know we've got a couple folks joining us on our YouTube channel. Feel free to drop questions in the YouTube chat. I'm keeping an eye on that as well. So I guess this explains why I was seeing some photos on social media of long lines at UK gas stations.
Yes, there's, I believe what's happening, very much like how certain governors here in the United States have called in the National Guard to help drive school buses for kids. Over there, I think Boris Johnson is getting close to calling in their version of the National Guard, or getting their troops ready to help get what they call lorries, in terms for trucks, to get gas to the pump. So yes, they're dealing with some significant energy crises going on right now.
All right, well, I am not seeing any questions in Zoom. I do not see any questions on YouTube, so I guess we can end it here. Tyler, thank you very much for still giving this week's presentation. I know things are a little bit hectic for you. I totally get it, but thank you nevertheless for presenting this week.
Of course. Always enjoy. I'll see you guys next semester.
All right, sounds good. This weather briefing and all other weather briefings are archived on the Campus Weather Service YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Campus Weather Service. Next week, we will have retired NWS State College meteorologist Rich Grum joining us for the first weather briefing of October. That'll be at the same time, same place, 10:15 a.m. Eastern. I look forward to seeing all of you next week. Have a great week, everybody.